The Evolution of Atari ST Vertical Flying Shooters, Part 1, The Early Years, 1986 through Q1 of 1988. More than 17 vertical flying shooters were released on the Atari ST platform, starting in 1986 through early 1988. Many more would be released later in 1988 and beyond. ST Action magazine, in its first issue in May of 1988, tried to capture the shooter scene up to that point. They did it in an article titled STA Mega Test 10 Scrolling Shoot 'em Ups Compared. We're going to start there too. This Atari ST Action magazine issue in May of 1988 is a good starting place in the evolution of Atari ST vertical flying shooters, and shows that this genre was already getting quite significant releases and press for the system. The magazine reviewed 9 of these games plus 1 horizontal shooter in a special mega test section of the magazine. These 9 games are the early foundation of the vertical shooting genre on Atari's 16-bit machine. More technical achievements would come in later years, but these represent some of both the high and low points of early shoot-'em-up gaming on the Atari ST. 1986 would see one of the best of the early shooters, Plutos by Microvalue, released for both the ST and Amiga. This is a fun, straightforward shooter that doesn't have a lot of extra bolt-on weapons or fancy graphics, but it's one of the most enjoyable, satisfying of the early vertical shooters for the ST. 1987 would see the release of 3 more shooters that represent the good, the better, and possibly the ugly of a ST vertical flying shooters in Jupiter Probe, Goldrunner, both by Microdeal, and Screaming Wings by Red Rat. And that's not all, of course. 1987 was a busy year for Atari ST vertical flying shooters. Trauma by French label Airy Informatique also arrives on store shelves. It's a difficult but fun blast that brings some very interesting power-ups to the formula. While Nexus's Hades Nebula did a fine job of giving ST fans another good, if really difficult, vertical flying shooter before they went out of business shortly after its release. Rounding out 1987, at least in ST Action's mind, was the good at first sight but plain and bland Xevious arcade conversion by US Gold. Early 1988 would see the release of what is the pinnacle of early ST shooters, and quite possibly still the best on the system, Xenon by the Bitmap Brothers, released by Melbourne House. Later in that quarter, Atari ST fans would be treated to a decent but unspectacular Taito arcade conversion in Slap Fight by Imagine. ST Action also covers Skyfighter by Creation Software, but it really is a horizontal shooter, very similar to Goldrunner in execution, and we'll leave that for a video on horizontal shooters. Let's dive deeper into these games and see what made each of them tick or not tick, and give our own once-over to each. We'll also cover 3 notable games ST Action left out. Plutos by Microdeal and Microvalue. ST Action scores: graphics 60%, sound 20%, addictiveness 63%, overall 57%. What they liked the 2-player option. What they didn't like, that it didn't offer much new in gameplay. What we think: Plutos didn't offer much new in 1988 when this article was written, but it was first released in 1986 when there were very few Atari ST games available, and it was pretty much the cream of the crop. It might be rose-colored glasses that we're viewing it in, but we did find it to be a hell of a lot of fun to play, improving on the arcade game Xevious, but not quite as good as some of the 8-bit shooters that were coming out at the time. It doesn't offer cool bolt-on weapons like some of the games that will come after, but its gameplay is right in the sweet spot. Today we call it the all-out classic that it is on the ST. Jupiter Probe by Microdeal. ST Action scores: graphics 54%, sound 52%, addictiveness 52%, overall 53%. What they liked: Rob Hubbard's soundtrack. What they didn't like: Plutos, they said it didn't offer much new and lacked features of later games. Again, we do not 100% agree with ST Action, and obviously in early 1987, this was basically competing with only Plutos and was out on the same label. It was different enough though to still be good, but yes, we agree that the graphics and gameplay can be a little bland. It's one of the first Steve Back and Rob Hubbard creations, and while it's not their most creative work, it shows the technical prowess and skill that they would use in further titles down the line. Goldrunner, also by Microdeal. ST Action scores: graphics 64%, sound 54%, addictiveness 45%, overall 58%. What they liked: the graphics, the music, and the speech. What they didn't like: pretty much everything else, including the gameplay. On this one, we agree about the gameplay, but the graphics and sound are pretty much state-of-the-art for the ST, especially in 1988, and deserved much higher scores. Given this graphical and technical prowess, the game lacks one important element: gameplay.
Welcome to Goldrunner.
It breaks at least two of the rules of a fun game: a lot of cheap deaths and needing to start at the beginning every time you die. What this game did do was show just how well Steve Back and Rob Hubbard could push the humble ST, even in 1987.
You're doing great. Be careful. Welcome. Be careful. Get ready. Goldrunner. Watch out! Be careful. Get ready. Watch out! Keep going! Oh no! Be careful!
Ah, Screaming Wings by Red Rat. From one of the better games to one of the poorer games. ST Action scores, graphics 32%, sound 18%, addictiveness 24%, overall 25%. What they liked, that it's set on Earth and not in space. What they didn't like, pretty much everything else. While we think Screaming Wings is better than the 25% given by ST Action, it's not a game that we'd ever really boot up to play on the ST. It showed a good effort for a £14 budget title, but it was just not up to snuff. Couple that with the fact that the Atari 8-bit computer got a much better version, and you understand how poorly this was received.
Red Rat Software proudly presents
Screaming Wings? Good shooting!
Trauma by Terra Npva. ST Action scores, graphics 58%, sound 50%, addictiveness 47%, overall 56%. What they liked, there was finally an ST game with good power-ups. What they didn't like, you only get one life and you have a health bar. This is the first game we are covering that we never played before this video. I love vertical and horizontal shooters. To make one right, you need a couple of things. The difficulty of the game needs to be intrinsic to the gameplay and not based on hellfire of bullets or collision with scenery. And you need interesting things to shoot. Trauma has all of this plus power-ups in a Plutos sort of way, with the added element of transporters. It's a fun blast, but power-ups are rare to find. Hades Nebula by Nexus. ST Action scores. Graphics 83%, sound 70%, addictiveness 72%, overall 78%. What they liked: the graphics and sound and the power-up system. What they didn't like: the difficulty. We liked this one, but not as much as ST Action. It's curious that they would give scores that are so much higher than Goldrunner for graphics and sound. Possibly they are slightly better or on par, but not 25 points higher each. CV&G magazine agreed with ST Action on graphics and sound, but also complained that the controls were far too sluggish to be effective. We liken Hades Nebula to a Xevious clone that does Xevious much better than Xevious, but also includes great sound and power-ups. The difficulty, though, keeps us from getting to see what comes after level 1. Xevious by US Gold. ST Action scores. Graphics 32%, sound 23%, addictiveness 37%, overall 36%. What they liked: the poster and the badge that came in the box. What they didn't like: pretty much everything else. I can say that we were very excited to get this arcade conversion for the ST in 1988. But we didn't play it much because we had the Atari 7800 version and we played that much more. I can also say that it has both the charms and the weaknesses of an early ST arcade conversion, and it deserves a score a little higher than 36%, especially with the sound, but not much higher. We're not sure it's really better than any other game on this list other than Screaming Wings. Xenon by Melbourne House. ST Action scores: graphics 88%, sound 68%, addictiveness 84%, overall 85%. What they liked: everything. What they didn't like: maybe a bit of the music is not as good as they would like. In Xenon, you navigate both in the air and land to destroy the enemy. Designed on the ST first by Bitmap Brothers, it is what Dungeon Master is to RPGs in its own genre on the ST. This was the first truly great ST arcade game we ever purchased from an import shop in California. It truly stands on its own, and all we can say is that we give it 90% across the board. It's an ultimate ST classic and one of the best in the genre.
Sector 1.
Slap Fight or Alcon by Ocean. ST Action scores: graphics 57%, sound 48%, addictiveness 54%, overall 61%. What they liked: the scrolling. What they didn't like: the sound effects, the graphics, and the gameplay. This is a Taito arcade conversion of the game Alcon. The music is quite good, but it is difficult and kind of drab looking for a vertical shooter. The scrolling is quite good, but your ship is equipped with no shields, and one-hit cheapies abound in this game world. Collect the stars left when you shoot the enemy, and the next power-up will highlight in the bottom display when you can add it. Press the spacebar to add them to your ship, but be warned, pressing the spacebar will mean taking your hand from the joystick, and inevitably you will be shot down. If you are careful and collect enough power, you can play this game for a while, but it will take practice getting there. It's a nice diversion, but there are much better games of this type on the ST during this time period. Other notable games. Those are the 9 vertical shooters that ST Action highlighted in issue number 1. There are a few more from 1987 that we'd like to mention. The first is War Heli by Aeronautica. We give this a 69%. No laughing. One of the better helicopter shooters. It's like a Codemasters game called Violator, but that didn't come out until 1991. The colors in this are a little drab, and it has a very high difficulty. It was developed by 2 Swiss hackers, and you can actually save your game to disk. The next one is Mission's Genocide by Firebird. We gave this one a 65%. We could only find it on Automation CD number 4. It's a well-made early Xevious clone. In June 1988, ST Action would finally review this game, but it came out in 1987. They gave it a 56%. They said, vertically scrolling shoot-em-ups are already in abundance, so I am constantly amazed at the percentage of releases that add to this most prolific subject. Mission Genocide cannot be described as innovative or original. The gameplay is neither arduous nor taxing, and the graphical presentation fails to inspire. This game simply offers an arcade entertainment at a so-called budget price. The next one is Sonic Boom by Activision. We gave this 65% also. It's a Sony arcade conversion. Everything is above average in this game except the difficulty, which is way too high. The Games Machine magazine gave it 79%, and they described it like this. The backgrounds make good use of color, but lack detail except for certain metallic features. Sprites are average drone planes looking like blurry floating men, but the scrolling is smooth and the control response is very good. The sounds are very plain. For completeness' sake, let's take a look at the other vertical shooters released in 1987. As you'll see, Xevious and 1941 were big inspirations at the time, except for this next game, called Eyeball.
Oh no!
So those are the early years of the Atari ST vertical scrolling shooters. Bookended in 1986 by the fun and possibly too good for its release time Plutos, and the early 1988 and quite possibly the best on the system Xenon. What does the rest of 1988 have in store? Part 2 will cover that and more.
Into the vertical plane, generation Atari. Into the vertical plane, generation Atari.
Into the vertical plane.
An 8-Bit Rocket Studios production.